If you've made it to this channel, then you probably have already heard about the Holocaust, the genocide in World War II the Nazis committed, resulting in the mass extermination of more than 6 million Jewish people in Europe. You may also know that while the genocide was committed by the Germans, it took place mostly in Poland. But have you ever wondered why the Holocaust happened in Poland? We're actually going to talk about why the Holocaust happened in Poland in this video, but before we get going too far, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for my channel. That way you can support me and get more content just like this in the future. As I was saying, the Holocaust was an attempt at mass extermination of the Jewish people by Nazi Germany. The vast majority of the extermination camps were in Poland, and that's not because the Polish people were the ones doing the exterminating, although there is some controversial scholarship that has made some of those claims. The reason the camps were in Poland is largely because 2/3 of Europe's entire Jewish population was living in Eastern Europe at that time, and half of that population, or 1/3 of the overall population, was living in Poland alone. By 1933, about 60% of the entire world's Jewish population lived in Europe, where they comprised only 1.7% of the European population. According to the 1931 Polish census, the overall population was just shy of 32 million people, and the overall Jewish population was just over 3 million people, which means that 10% of Poland identified as Jewish. This not only meant that Poland was home to the highest Jewish population in all of Europe, but also one of the most dense populations of Jewish people. And the reason Poland had such a huge Jewish population goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. As far as we can tell, the first Jewish contact with Poland happened in 965 or 966 as some traders passed through. By the time 1085 rolls around, we have the first permanent Jewish settlement in the city of Przemyśl in southern Poland. Not long after that, in 1098, we have the first major Jewish migration into Poland due to the First Crusade. Bolesław III and the other Polish princes very quickly recognized the major positive impact that this Jewish people had on their communities and their economy. Pretty soon, the Jewish people were the backbone of the trade economy in Poland and constituted the majority of the middle class. Mieszko III even employed Jewish people to work in his mint, and we have Polish coins from this time that have Hebrew markings on them. Because of all of this, the Jewish population in Poland began to flourish, and by 1237 we have communities in Płock. By 1287, there's a large community in Kalisz, and by 1304, Kraków is home to Ulica Żydowska, or Jewish Street. Now, eventually this tolerance shifted a bit after pressures from the Roman Catholic Church and their German neighbors became too severe. But even then, a lot of Polish princes maintained themselves as protectors of their Jewish communities. Probably the most important example of this is the Statute of Kalisz, passed in the 1260s by the Prince Bolesław the Pious. The Statute of Kalisz was actually a general charter of Jewish liberties that allowed them to worship, travel, and trade however they wanted without worry of being attacked or looked down upon or mistreated. Soon after that, similar privileges and charters were given to much of the Jewish population over the rest of Poland. There's a lot of really interesting things about the Statute of Kalisz, but here's some of the most important points. For example, point number 1, Christians could only testify in court against a Jew if another Jewish person also substantiated the claims. Point 5 said that Jewish bankers could take anything as collateral for loans except for church paraphernalia. Points 9 through 11, 21, and 35 held Christians responsible for any harm done to Jews. Point 35 actually punished Christians who failed to help their Jewish neighbors when they were attacked during the night. Point number 12 said that Jews had to pay the same tolls as everyone else and could not be charged more specifically because they were Jewish. Point 36 gave Jews the freedom to touch and purchase any goods they desired and couldn't be banned from a place of business specifically on the point of religion or ethnicity. The Statute of Kalisz also protected Jews from outlandish accusations, including point 31, which says, "Accusing Jews of drinking Christian blood is expressly prohibited. If despite this, a Jew should be accused of murdering a Christian child, such a charge must be sustained by testimony of 3 Christians and 3 Jews." Now, this isn't to say that everything was perfectly fine for Jewish people living in Poland in the Middle Ages. For example, the Black Death saw a huge Jewish migration into Poland as they were seeking this tolerance. Unfortunately, similar to in other countries suffering from the plague, the Jewish population was partially blamed for the outbreak of the Black Death. In 1348, the very first blood libel accusation is recorded in Poland against Jewish people, and by 1367, we have the very first pogrom in Poznań. That being said, even though it was far from perfect living there, it was significantly better to be a Jewish person living in Poland than just about anywhere else in all of Europe. Even with the beginnings of pogroms in Poland, we still have mass migrations of Jewish people from Germany and surrounding countries into Polish communities. This pattern continued for much of the rest of Poland's history. You have periods where it's very, very peaceful, and the Jewish population can flourish, with the occasional spurt of riots or anti-Semitic violence thrown in, usually incited by foreigners who weren't even Polish. For example, the Italian Franciscan friar John of Capistrano came through Poland and accused Jews of profaning against Christianity. As a result, he got them banished from Lower Silesia for a while, but they ended up coming back after everyone realized he was full of it. It's also important to note that in many other countries, Jewish people were forced to dress a certain way, wear certain badges on their clothing, wear specific hats while out in public, or declare on public documents and in business dealings that they were Jewish. Poland had very few, if any, of these laws, and in fact often had laws restricting those kinds of laws from going into place. And even in other countries, such as Spain, where laws were put in place to try and give Jewish people rights and privileges, they never came close to the same level of tolerance and protection that Poland granted to its Jewish population. It should also be noted that this tolerance was not exclusive to the Jewish community, but to everyone living in Poland. In the 16th century, Poland passed the Warsaw Confederation, which, among other things, ensured tolerance to everyone living there. This applied to Protestants, foreigners, anyone who wanted to come was welcome. Now, there's a few exceptions here and there, the largest being that the Catholic Church was able to convince the king to ban the Hussites, a Bohemian Protestant group, from the country. But even then, that was overturned later. While Poland's majority population has almost always been Roman Catholic native Polish speakers, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was one of the most diverse kingdoms in Europe, consisting of Ukrainians, Lithuanians, Belarusians, Cossacks, Jewish people, Ruthenians, Czechs, Slovaks, Germans, Russians, even people who identified as Greek Orthodox Church followers, and many, many more. So while we may not think of Poland as a very diverse country today, or even historically because everyone had very similar skin tone, culturally speaking, Poland is historically one of the most tolerant and diverse countries in the world. This diversity and tolerance is exactly what attracted many people, not just Jewish people, to move to Poland throughout the centuries. In 1930s Poland, you could expect to hear languages such as Russian, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Kashubian, Armenian, Romani, Yiddish, Hebrew, German, Russian. I think I said Russian twice, but you get the point. Lots of people whose first language was not Polish. In fact, a third of all people living in Poland were not ethnically Polish. You compare that to the post-war numbers, where instead 97% of people are ethnically Polish. And instead of having a population of 3 million Jewish people, it's closer to 10 to 20,000. This beautiful, diverse country that was famous for its tolerance and love of all cultures and protecting cultures and religions attracted so many people, at least prior to the partitions in the 1700s. And while this diversity attracted a huge number of people from a wide range of backgrounds, it also attracted the attention of the Nazi Germans, who were seeking to eradicate diversity and create a homogenous, superior group. And so it makes sense that a nation that was so ethnically and culturally diverse would stand out as the first primary target of a regime bent on creating a single homogenous group and getting rid of all diversity wherever possible. Now, there are many other reasons that drove people away, such as communism, borders changing, the partitions, and much, much more. But World War II stands out as the most recent and possibly most significant of those reasons. And so when we look at what Poland lost, it wasn't just a large portion of their Jewish population, it was a lot of their heritage. And that's something that's worth remembering, even if it's usually overlooked. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much. It helps me a lot. And then also just remember to like and subscribe so you can see more like this in the future. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.